This video is all about composition tips. Specifically, we're going to focus on your travel and landscape photography. Now, I'm going to be talking a lot about point of capture. So these are composition tips at the point of capture with your camera. How do you compose for better shots? I'm also going to take you through Luminar AI, show you composition AI, and some of my favorite features inside of Luminar AI. So let's dive straight into this. I want to respect y'all's time. Let's get into it. I have Luminar AI loaded up, and I also have a bunch of sample images. If you guys would like to download these images, you can find the exercise files in the link in the description of this video. So let's begin with point of capture, and we're going to start with our first compositional tip and technique, the rule of thirds. I'm not sharing with you the rule of thirds because I want you guys to lean on this as the first composition technique that you use. And really, to be honest, it's overused in my opinion. It's a compositional guide that is worth understanding, but I want you to understand more than just this one thing. And specifically, I want you to understand that the rule of thirds can often lead to a less interesting image. So I have this shot loaded up. It's a shot of a bird in China. Okay, so let's jump into the edit panel. I'm going to go to composition AI just so that we bring up the crop tool and so we can see where our overlay is. So right now it's using the rule of thirds overlay. Now, if I click and drag, I can actually bring this right to the rule of thirds. So I'm going to place the horizon line on a third. And I'm going to place the bird on a third. That sounds really funny. I'm going to press enter now, and you'll notice, well, the image lost a lot of its appeal. At least to me it did. Maybe some of you prefer this more, and if you do, that's great. But for me, this wider shot is far more interesting of an image. So rule of thirds is a great place to start, but I quickly want you to start working beyond it. And what I love about composition AI, so if I go back to that tool right here, composition AI, when I first heard of Luminar introducing it, I thought, man, I don't know if it's going to understand, negative space and balance and symmetry and all the other techniques that you can use compositionally beyond a rule of thirds. You could train it pretty easily to do that. Then I got it and I started using it and I was like, actually, it's pretty decent. So if I press composition AI on this image, notice it doesn't just jump to rule of thirds. In fact, if I press enter on its suggestion, I actually get a better looking image. So composition AI is taking in a lot of different data. This is machine learning to understand the way that photographers would compose and edit images over tens of thousands of images to get this tool. I'm not saying that it's going to work each and every time and get you the exact place. What I am saying, though, is that if you're learning composition, this is a fantastic tool for your toolkit because it's going to give you suggestions. And sometimes it's going to be spot on. Sometimes it might need a bit of tweaking, but either way, it's going to help you in the learning process. Okay, so we understand rule of thirds. Let's move beyond this. I'm going to talk next about number 2, which is balance. And side note, I'm going to say, I probably should have said this at the beginning. My primary focus as a photographer is portraiture, okay? I'm not a landscape photographer. That being said, though, when I'm out and about, I do like to capture cool landscapes. When I'm traveling with the family, when I'm on work assignments, I still want to get images that are better than the average landscape. And that's what I want all these tips to be designed for. These are tips that you can use with any camera, tips that will immediately step up your landscape and travel photography. Today, side note, my favorite travel photography combo is the Canon R5 with the 28-70 f2. I'm going to save the why behind this for a separate video. I'm also going to say that really you can use anything you want. Actually, I would say my favorites are the Canon R5 paired with my iPhone. This is the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and I shoot just as much on both of these. Any camera works. Most of these were shot on old cameras, Rebels, Canon 40Ds, Nikon D600. Like anything is going to work in this regard. And if you want a great walk around lens, grab a wide to zoom type lens. Okay, so they have like great walk around lenses like 28 to 200s, 28 to 300s, whatever camera you have. That focal range is absolutely fantastic. Why? Because it's super versatile, and when it comes to landscapes, you don't generally need to be shooting wide open that often unless that's kind of part of your style. So you have some tips, some bonus tips on gear. Okay, we are talking balance. So number 2, balance. What is this? Well, this is a photograph of a boat. Actually, this is on the same trip to China several years back. And I like this first photograph, okay? But the negative space on this right side leaves the image, in my opinion, unbalanced. So in this case, one of my favorite things to do is kind of look for other objects in the scene. Sometimes it means walking around, but either way, what I'm looking for is other objects to kind of create a sense of balance within the image. Now, this was had by just zooming out in this particular scene. And what I had in this scene was these kind of boat shanties, if you will, on this right side. I don't know if that's the right word for this, so please forgive me if it's not. But this dock right here with this boat, that created this perfect balance. What I also loved about it, you're looking at the raw file, and what I loved is the blue tones that we got from the shade on this side versus the warm tones on this left side. So I really appreciated this kind of overall balance that this created. And side note, I'm actually going to bring this into Luminar. Let me show you one of my favorite things. I love that with every one of these images that we select, notice that it goes for this photo is actually looking at what's in the photograph and then suggesting different looks, different ideas for the overall toning. So as I flip through, you're seeing that, oh, it's going to overcast waterscapes. As I go back to this, it's going to filmic, cinematic. So I'm actually going to click that. And let's see if we find one of these that we like. I actually really like this nostalgic haze. And I'm going to show you one of my, you're seeing my favorite thing here is the speed of this. I can find a look that I really like. I can go to sky and do some simple replacements very quick. And watch this. I'm going to select this sunset cloud. And I'm going to go to adjustments and just dial this haze up and take the brightness up. And I get this gorgeous final image with just like a few clicks with a sky replacement. It's absolutely awesome when it comes to landscape photography. Okay, so number 2 is balance. Number 3 is getting into and capturing the action, okay? There is a lot of action when it comes to landscape and travel photography. You've got people riding around on bikes, motorcycles, you've got cars, traffic, you've got waves, motion in the environment. So notice that when we take a shot like this and it's kind of pulled back, it's not really that interesting, right? The other problem is we're kind of shooting with the sunlight. So we don't get any shadows in this. We end up with a sort of boring kind of flat image. So what I want you to do is get into a position where you can shoot against the light. So you kind of you're basically shooting from the shadows into the highlights and zoom in on the action. So these are the exact same waves zoomed in and from a different angle. Look at this. It's wild, the difference between these two shots, but it's the same spot. We're in the same place, same time of day. All I've done is move to another cliffside and zoomed in, this one on a 70 to 200 to get in tight on these waves. So once again, the suggestion is going to pop up waterscapes. I'm actually going to choose one of these, and I already really like that look. So that's great. But in each of these, you'll notice that exact same technique employed. So whenever I'm at the beach, I'm looking for a spot where I can see beautiful waves crashing, and then I'm looking to zoom in and really capture the action in those scenes. We get to a much more interesting image. Let's go back to Composition AI on this one, see what this one actually suggests. So I'm going to go to the edit side. We're going to close down the creative panel for a sec. Let's go back up. Okay. Zoom in. I like how it kind of cropped off that little rock at the bottom. What I'm going to do here as well is just kind of pull in from the top, and we have our final composition. So this is a case where Composition AI gave us a really great kind of starting point, and we're going to finish it with a little bit of a tweak, but I like what it did. Okay, number 4. I want to talk negative space. Now, if you actually go back to that very first image, part of what makes this image really appealing is the negative space. We have this bird framed, and there's really nothing else in this top section other than the mountains and a little bit of graduation and color tone. If this was going to print, I would knock out this little spot. I don't know if that's a boat or what it is. But there's detail on the bottom side. The top end of the image is just negative space. I'm going to show you another example. I was at the Great Salt Lake when I saw these two kayakers going across the water. Now, this shot was interesting. I was kind of zooming in to see how far I could get into them. And with good resolution, I could get pretty close, actually, if I were to zoom in and then crop in post. But what I found more interesting about this was the negative space in the scene. In fact, the next image where I zoomed out and just showed them in this vast landscape where you just have blue tones all around them, that was my favorite look in the shot. So one of my favorite things to do is to have a large image filled with negative space with one or two sole subjects that kind of guide us through the purpose or the story in the image. And so here we have that in the kayakers. I mean, really it's one subject, but it just happens to be four people kind of grouped up in this case. Okay, so negative space is a fantastic compositional tool. It brings us, when it's used correctly, it brings our attention and our eye right to the subject because there's nothing else in the frame to really focus in on. In a scene like this, it also shows us the vastness of the entire scene. I'm going to see, by the way, what the template suggestions gives me here. It gives me water. Let's see which one of these I like. Ooh, Deadly Reef. I kind of like the black and white look cool. That silver flash. Deep focus. Ooh, deep focus is nice. Let's leave it there. Okay, let's go to tip number 5. I'm going to have my editors help me out here because what I want to show you is that none of these images, and these are actually already processed as just a black and white because I want to do another tutorial showing you guys how to set up a look and apply it across a set of images so that you get a consistent and cohesive look across an entire set. So when you look at these images, none of these images are particularly interesting in and of themselves, right? This brings me to tip 5, which is to shoot for the story. And what you're looking at is to capture the entire details in a scene across a spread of images. So shoot as a spread. That's tip number 5. And what you'll see is, as these 5 images by themselves aren't that interesting, when you place them together on the screen or on a blog or in a piece of wall art, then they become far more interesting. It tells a complete story in a scene, and I love this technique because oftentimes one single image isn't really going to capture all the great stuff that you're seeing in a particular location. So instead, zoom in, focus on the details, and shoot it as a story. Shoot it as a complete set of images that makes for fantastic wall art for your home. So shoot your own wall art. That's my last thing. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the look at kind of composition AI and how it can help you when it comes to composing your images, and also some of my favorite features about working in Luminar AI. If you guys enjoyed, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. It's always weird saying that, but that's how you keep up with more of the great content that's being put out. Feel free to give us a like as well. That helps us out a lot on the channel too. In the meantime, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.